Hello, and welcome to another episode of Schlock Tactics, the movie podcast where we believe badder is better and aim to watch the truly terrible troll movies so that you don't have to. My name is Ash, and I'm joined once again by Mark. Oh, hi, Mark!
Hello!
So, after a little break from the podcast, we have returned. If you missed the last episode, it was a Godzilla special to celebrate the new film and the 65th anniversary of Godzilla. So we did Son of Godzilla and the ever-controversial Godzilla 1998, aka Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. So if you did miss that episode, go back and check it out. It's still available there, and you can kind of see some of the not-so-good entries into the massive Godzilla franchise. In the meantime, actually, you may have noticed over on our YouTube channel, we have been publishing short reviews of more current movies, not necessarily bad movies, some of them quite good. It's a little show called Short, Sharp Schlock, so go over there and check out the YouTube channel, the Schlock Tactics YouTube channel, and you can see some of those shorter reviews as well if you want to keep up with the most recent movies, and if you don't have too much time on your hands, they're only about 5 minutes a piece, so you can go check that out as well. But today we are back in business, we are back to our usual programming, and we are reviewing one of the most infamous bad movies. It's on the Mount Rushmore of bad movies, the iconic Troll 2, and of course if you've got to review Troll 2 then I guess you have to review Troll 1 as well, so we're doing that one as well. So Troll from 1986 and the infamous Troll 2 from 1990. So first of all here we are going to get into Troll itself from 1986. So this comes out in the kind of the height of little rubber monster creature features, the gremlins, the critters, the ghoulies. And then so here's a sort of version of that. It's called Troll, and as you can imagine it is about a troll, a short little goblin-y creature. This was directed by John Carl Buechler, a guy that would go on actually to direct the Ghoulies movie, so I think he got his practice in on this one for little ridiculous looking puppets, and they would also do Friday the 13th film later on as well. So a guy that knows his horror, loves his horror, and in fact this film was meant to be a lot more of a horror film before I think the studio insisted that it become a PG-13. So it's one of those films that starts off as a horror film, and somewhere along the way they wanted it to be a kids film, but you can't quite remove all of the horror elements and all of the terrifying sort of freakish creatures.
And it turned out to not even be scary even for kids.
No. I mean, they probably are going for Gremlins, which is a very rare example of a horror film that is all right for kids as well.
Yeah.
Although it's still quite scary. But yeah, they didn't nail either camp in this film. Well, they nailed the camp, but they didn't hit horror or kids film tenets. So yeah, this one is all set in a block of flats, block of apartments in America. Both of these films actually start off with kind of a fairy tale montage or opening to sort of set the scene that we're going to be seeing some fairy tale type characters inserted into present day America, even though they were both filmed in Italy. So we get like this long zoom on this sort of fairy tale book over the opening credits, and you get these kind of fairy tale scenes in the woods. Then we cut to our sort of protagonists in the movie, the Potter family. So yes, that does include Harry Potter Jr. and Harry Potter Sr. 11 years before J.K. Rowling claims that she just came up with the name Harry Potter out of nowhere, and a setting that involves goblins and fairies out of nowhere. I think J.K. Rowling is a secret fan of this movie.
Has she been quizzed on this?
Yes, she claims that she has no knowledge of this film, which I do believe. But that doesn't mean that there isn't someone there that maybe suggested
subconsciously slipped in.
She must have heard this name somewhere. She didn't just think of the name Harry Potter. I don't believe that. Because there's two Harry Potters in this film. It's not just one, there's two. So there's father and son here. Son is actually played by the kid who was Atreyu in the Never-Ending Story. The guy that's... the kid that loses his horse in the swamp, and you always see it memed as being the saddest thing to ever happen in a movie. So yeah, he impressed in a Never-Ending Story and got picked up to play Harry Potter Jr. in Troll, so it's not bad going for him. His dad, as they've moved in, says he's going to go around the corner and get a rat burger. No explanation of what this necessarily is. This maybe ties in with the anti-meat message of Troll 2 as well. But he's going to go and get a disgusting rat burger. He says, can you watch your little sister while I do that? And he just says, I'd rather watch Star Trek. So nobody watches his sister. So she's just left to roam around this apartment block that they've never been to before. Ends up going down into the basement, and straight away, 2.5 minutes in, you see the creature straight away grabbing her in the basement. Well, what were your first impressions of this creature, this troll creature, and how it looked?
Well, it wasn't scary. I was just quite shocked to see it so early on. It just didn't follow any kind of horror norms. Where you get usually get about a third of the way into a film before you see any kind of beast. But yeah, it's small. Kind of looked like
the leprechaun.
The
leprechaun.
I was thinking that. It looked like the leprechaun.
It is a short actor in a suit, and the short actor plays a separate character, which we'll get to as well. But yeah, this is a short actor in a rubber sort of suit, and I mean, it looks better than the creatures in the second film. You can see obviously more of a budget in this movie. I thought it looked pretty good. Like I say, it's not very scary, but it does look like some sort of fairy tale. Troll under the bridge, which is meant to look like more so. So I thought I was pretty good. It's got this like little emerald ring, again quite leprechaun-ish. It doesn't really have any weapons or bite you or anything. It just comes up to you and kind of puts his ring in your face, and it'll like inject you into your arm or something, and that's how he kind of he turns you into like vegetation. Into trees. I mean, it's worth noting, every article mentioning these films says that there's absolutely no link between these two. Troll 2 is not a sequel to Troll 1, and there's no similarities at all, but there are. There's definitely a plant-based vegetation theme throughout both of them. So even if it was unintentional, you do get that in this film. And the idea is early on, even though you see the creature early on, what he does is he transfers his spirit into the younger sister, so he possesses the younger sister, and so she's going to be the troll for a third of the film, maybe. Just a sort of like the little kid from Poltergeist, creepy little blonde kid. It's rat burgers all round, Harry Potter Senior says. They're all sitting there, as is a tradition, certainly in my life. You move into a new house, you get a chippy. For the first night in, you've got no food in, so they get the Potter family get rat burgers. That's their sort of family tradition when they move. We're introduced into some quite colourful characters in this apartment block. We've got Mr. Dickinson, who is this kind of pervy old sort of sleazy character, inexplicably played by Sonny Bono of Sonny and Cher fame, who was only available for like a couple of hours for this film, because I don't know whether he was very famous, but that's all he had available. He's sort of a swinger. There's like a former Marine type that's like jogging around the building, and he's sort of weirdly anti-literature, anti-magazines.
It's like, you're reading a book? Like
that's for commies and stuff like that.
This swinger's like annoyed that they're making noise or something.
Yeah, he doesn't
because he wants to have women run.
You can't have kids running around here because I'm going to be fucking anything that moves and bringing home loads of sweet ass is a sort of the theme. And then we're introduced here to a very young Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who people will recognise from Seinfeld and many other things as well. This is her very first debut in a feature film. And she plays just a sort of a girl next door sort of character, skipping around sort of fairly inoffensively, and she's got a boyfriend as well who's not featured too much. So Wendy, the younger sister here, starts to kind of sort of show off these troll-like powers while still looking like a child. So she goes rabid and starts like biting people. She's got superhuman strength and can like throw her dad into a wall and stuff like that. And they just all are like, ha ha. Oh, kids and their silly games and stuff like that.
She goes, I'm Godzilla, or something.
Yeah, nice Godzilla reference. She wanders into Mr. Dickinson's sort of love den. Well, obviously he wants her to get out because he's got a lady coming over. But then the troll ends up, or she ends up injecting Mr. Dickinson with the little ring here, and he sort of falls on the floor and just gets a really fat like face and throat, and starts like the green liquid starts coming out of his mouth, and that's him sort of turning into a plant. First of many sort of cutscenes where we cut to a kind of a forest setting where there are all these bizarre puppets sort of fucking, it looks like. There's some sort of, it's like one that looks like a look just like a massive turd. One that looks like a gill man from Creature from the Black Lagoon. Mini versions of the troll itself. And they're all like writhing over each other, and the whole apartment turns into like vegetation and plants everywhere. So it escalates quickly, really. Once the troll sort of injects Mr. Dickinson, his whole flat turns into this sort of sex party. I suppose because that's what he used his flat for. Maybe there was a continuity there, because his flat was used for fucking, and then they use it for fucking. But you get your first look at these other kind of fairy or nymph type characters that are really much lower budget than the main troll. They're really like quite crappy puppets that are sort of writhing over each other and going these sort of stuff. So really bizarrely, there's an old woman that lives at the sort of top of the block of flats. She's got a mushroom in a pot that sings and talks to her. I'm not sure if this was ever explained. It was really weird.
No.
It just looks like this sort of dickhead in a pot with a face that just like sings to her, and she sort of talks to it and sometimes puts a cloth over it.
Eunice, her name is, I think.
Eunice, her name is, yeah. So she's the kind of witchy pagan character for this film, like there is in Troll 2. Harry Jr. Comes up to sort of ask her about what's happening in the apartment building. She calls him a ninny. And then Wendy encounters this character outside the building who is actually the same short actor who was in the suit, the troll suit. And he's playing a character here, Malcolm Mallory, who's sort of like an erudite sort of teacher, a professor type. He's wearing like a tweed jacket. Even though he's really short, he's got like a tweed jacket, and he looks quite refined, quite sophisticated. He sort of looks like a small Lionel Richie. This is played by a guy called Phil Fondacaro, and his filmography is a bit of a who's who. Like many short actors, he's got his big break as an Ewok in Star Wars. Like many of the Ewoks, he went on to be in Willow as one of the local short villagers. He was actually uncredited in Invaders from Mars, a film we did a couple of episodes ago. He was a drone. He was in the Garbage Pail Kids movie, another, perhaps not on the Mount Rushmore, but quite a big and bad movie. Ghoulies 2, Phantasm 2 as a hooded dwarf, uncredited. Something called Nerds of a Feather.
I'm sure we'll end up doing some of these films.
Yeah, so I think he's going to pop up again, for sure, sooner rather than later. Uncredited Man at Birthday Party in The Doors. Poor sod doesn't get credits in many things. That's quite prolific, perhaps second only to Warwick Davis, but Phil Fondacaro here, who's playing the dual roles of Malcolm Mallory and Torok the Troll. And it's just really quite a formula to this film, where Wendy, as possessed by the troll, visits various characters in the apartment building in their apartments in an attempt to possess them and turn them into kind of a plant or like a pod person. And I think throughout the film, Harry Jr. does watch an old sci-fi film that looks similar to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You can tell they're reaching quite high in something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Is quite a clever political satire. They're not quite at that level, but you can see they're sort of looking at the whole who are your neighbours, the McCarthyism of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Can you trust the person in the flat next to you? What if they were one of them, one of a troll in this film? So he is reaching for bigger things here, certainly bigger things than Troll 2. What I did think quite a plus for this film was the sets in the apartments. They put a lot of effort into having each apartment for each character stand out and be particular to that character. So Mr. Dickinson has got like leopard print rugs on the wall because he's a shagger, and the marine guy's got like loads of guns and stuff and trophies on the wall, and Eunice has got kind of witchy medieval things. So like all the decorations and the furniture does kind of tie into each character, which I thought was quite a good attention to detail for a film like this anyway.
And then the family's home is just completely normal by comparison.
Yeah, because they're meant to be
a nice contrast.
You're everyman. They are us in this strange apartment building. Wendy invites this Malcolm Mallory dwarf character round for tea, and you just get a litany of dwarf jokes as soon as he comes in. They reel them off as though they were contractually obligated to do so. Malcolm, he ends up being some sort of professor that specialises in fairy tales and folk tales and stuff like that, conveniently. And there's a very strange scene where he's reading a fairy tale to the family around the table. All of the weird puppet creatures in the in the forest apartment downstairs just break into a musical number all of a sudden. As an actual, I mean, I think I read that there were meant to be words to this song, but the puppets were too shit to mime along to it. They didn't have the features to make it look like they were talking, so it just ended up being la 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 la, which is what it was, to a weird sort of musical tune. This is where it started to get a bit like a bad acid trip.
My notes get very vague here.
Oh, and the little Eunice's little mushroom gets a solo in this song as well, and because it does have a face, I think it gets more dialogue. Eunice takes a big like horn off the wall and blows it to do, I don't know what that does, call someone's attention.
All the trolls stop singing, don't they?
Yeah, silence the trolls and goblins downstairs. And it's obviously revealed at this point that Eunice is a witch, and she has the power and the knowledge to defeat all of the goblins and whatnot. Harry Jr. Goes up to see Eunice again. She says, I thought I heard a prepubescent knock on the door. Okay, how can you tell? Wendy visits Jeanette, the character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. All of a sudden she gets turned into some sort of nymph, running half naked through the woods. She hates it if this film is ever brought up in her presence. She's tried to forget this. Just like Jennifer Aniston tried to forget she was in Leprechaun and all these sorts of people. She's thoroughly ashamed that she was ever in this movie, and she doesn't appreciate anyone reminding her. Yeah. But here she is, transformed into some sort of wood nymph on an acid trip. Troll sort of sits in a chair in the corner, and it's like he's getting a lap dance from her, which is very strange. We do get what I would call an actual quite a good bit of writing and acting here. The Malcolm Mallory character, when he goes to see him in his apartment, and he gets this kind of quite good monologue about what it's like to be disabled, and the sort of ponders the nature of death and magic, and I sort of forgot I was watching a bad movie for maybe 2 minutes, because he's some quite good dialogue, quite well delivered as a monologue.
He seems like quite a humble, nice character as well.
Yeah, I think he was probably the best actor in the film. He was quite good, especially in this monologue, kind of talking about, do you know how difficult it is to be a short person, and he's also terminally ill. That's the point. He's got death hanging over him. He's got some sort of issue. The doctors told him he won't live. He says there's no magic in the world and this sort of thing. I thought, this is actually quite good dialogue. Where's this come from? But then
maybe he wrote it.
Yeah, maybe it was ad-libbed. Yeah. But then he gets transformed into a literal elf puppet. So same kind of actor, but rendered in like rubber with like pointy ears. So that's the end of him. But what's quite funny here is that the reason why he gets turned into like a static puppet is because then the troll character has to pick up this thing. So he has to be in the suit of the troll to be able to pick up the effigy of himself. Yeah. So he's got to look at this terrifying effigy, a miniature of himself. And so obviously you couldn't have the actor in both. They only had one dwarf, and they had to make do. So that I imagine he never quite forgot what it felt like to hold this weird rubber mold of his own body. The puppets and the plants just kind of start taking over. Some really rushed exposition here. Eunice just explains, once upon a time, Turok was a handsome prince, and he annoyed a witch, all this usual sort of stuff, and he was cursed to be a troll. Now he's raising his fairy army to take his revenge. This is his only cosmic chance, so he only gets 3 days to do this. I don't know why. I don't know if you were catching any of this plot.
I was trying not to drift off. Trying to concentrate, but...
It was some sort of the typical, like something in The Witcher, like someone gets cursed and turned into a troll and you've got to break the curse. It's like that sort of stuff, basically. You've only got 3 days to do it for some reason. Eunice turns into a younger woman for some reason. I'm not sure why. We go into like some hazy exterior, so we're outside, we're in like the woods again, it's all kicking off. Eunice gets turned into a tree stump, I believe. And then Harry Jr. is able to save Wendy. Then it's quite an interesting finale. They appear to have held back some of their budget so that they can have, your end of level boss at the end, because just like Story of Ricky, when you get to the end and you get this amazing fucking final boss. In this film, I wasn't expecting this, but at the end they save it right to the end, and they have this weird like demon troll that's about 10 foot tall, and is sort of summoned by Turok to fight Harry Jr. And it can kind of turn into a bat as well. It's like a demon bat troll thing. Pretty cool creation, really. Like, I think making it so massive, it didn't look as good as it could have if it was a normal size, but it's quite impressive that he has to fight this massive monster towards the end. And there's this weird kind of moment where the troll has a kind of a babyface turn. He turns against the boss as well and kind of changes his mind about the whole thing. Then they team up to defeat the big sort of demon bat. And they're kind of happy ever after then. And there's some sort of rug pull at the end where the cops go into the apartment, into the basement, and then all of a sudden he gets like sucked into the woods. Yeah. And so it's all going to start again, perhaps. Who knows? And then this bizarre puppet musical number over the end credits again. If you missed it the first time, here it is again. It was original music for the film. You may as well play it twice. So there it is, Troll from 1986. What were your overall thoughts of this one, Mark?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I didn't write any down, but there were some good lines towards the beginning, mainly. There's
a semblance of a script in here somewhere. Yeah.
I got a bit lost in the middle because I wasn't paying full attention. Just some kind of nonsense fantasy story in the middle, and then it got interesting at the end again.
Yeah, got kind of quite video game at the end.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was schlocky.
It's not as bad as I was expecting given the second one, which we'll go on to. But
I mean, it was bad.
It is bad. It is a very ill-judged horror kids film. It's everything that Gremlins isn't, or Critters. Those are films with little like bitey monsters that kids can watch, and it's a real good balance between the childlike fantasy and the quite good effects and stuff. And you can see what they were trying to go for, and this is part of several. We've talked about Leprechaun as well, and several little rubber monster movies. I'm sure we'll do several more as well. It's just Gremlins was such a huge hit in 1984 that everyone was trying to get on that kind of train of like, oh my god, you can make horror films for kids. That seems like such a huge Venn diagram. Kids will watch it, their parents will watch it, everyone will watch it. And most of the 80s was spent with films like this trying to capture that same balance from Gremlins, and none of them did really, apart from Critters. But Troll here fell pretty far of the Gremlins sort of high bar that was set. But there was some stuff to like in here. The short actor I thought was very good.
Yeah, I feel like if there was more of him in it, then it would have been a pretty good film.
Yeah, he turned up quite late.
And then it didn't really sort of drifted away from him again. There wasn't really much more of him after that.
There was somewhat of a good script. There was a couple of good actors. There was some really good set design. There were also some really bad actors. And I thought the creature design and the practical effects weren't up to scratch, really, when you put it up with other stuff. They tried for a lot of creatures, and as a result, a lot of them looked quite poor. Yeah, there it is, Troll. A bit of a kind of a forgettable mid-80s creature feature, but it did lay the very important foundation for Troll 2. Okay, which brings us on to one of the more infamous bad movies in history. I can't believe it's taken us over a year to get here, but we are finally here. Troll 2 from 1990. Much of everything you need to know about this film really was covered in a documentary that came out about 5 years or so ago called Best Worst Movie. Would recommend that to everyone listening. Gives you all the background behind this just incredible chaos and incredible story behind how this film was made and how this could possibly have been allowed to happen, to be produced. Directed here by Claudio Fragasso, an Italian director. It is called Troll 2, but it has nothing to do with Troll 1. There was no relationship between the studios, the directors, none of the same writers. It is basically, it was going to be called Goblin or Nilbog maybe, and at the last minute they called this one Troll 2, so people would think it was a sequel to Troll, which apparently did quite well, believe it or not. So yeah, this film is called Troll 2 to trick people into watching it who enjoyed Troll 1, and that is it. Actually produced by a guy called Joe D'Amato, who is an infamous kind of exploitation, erotic cinema producer as well, so you don't get the same kind of kids film flavour with this one as much. There are two things that I think that you and everyone need to know before we talk about this film that really frame it in the correct context. First thing you need to know is that nobody in this film is an actor. Nobody.
And it's not hard to believe.
I know you're not shocked. Everyone in this film turned up to a casting call to be extras and were cast as lead actors. That's how they got their cast. They didn't want to pay real actors. The father here is a dentist. Many of them have other professions. They just wanted to be an extra in a movie, and they all got cast in prominent lead speaking roles. That's the first thing you need to know. And the second most important thing to know is that this script was written by someone who does not speak English, translated poorly by someone who does not speak English, and they insisted that all the cast read the script verbatim, even though many of them insisted that it made no grammatical sense, no sense in the context of the story. They were shouted down by Mr. Fragasso here and told to read it exactly as had been written or translated, I suppose, in this context. So, in fact, the entire cast, English-speaking, the entire crew and director, Italian-speaking, no real intersection. One person on the crew was able to speak English and Italian, but apart from that, it was people talking presumably in their own language, loudly and pointing and gesturing. That's how the cast and crew were able to communicate. So taking both of those things into account, you can kind of see how we did end up with what we did get here. The film does open in a very similar way to Troll 1, fairy tale style. There's a fairy sort of boy called, I think, Peter, wandering through the woods, and there's we get our, again, first glimpse of the monsters here 2 minutes in, and you can see it's a very watered down version of the troll from the first film. These are very basic, generic looking rubber masks on short people in sort of wearing potato sacks. It's poor, very poor creature effects from the get-go. This guy meets a beautiful maiden in the woods that feeds him this green liquid, which is going to come up a lot in the film. And it's revealed that this story is being told by a character called Grandpa Seth. He's reading this to his grandson Josh. But then his mum comes up and says, time to go to bed. And there's no grandpa there. And it's revealed in a shocking twist 5 minutes in that Grandpa Seth has died quite a while ago. And Josh is sadly still having hallucinations and visions of his grandpa. But the dad's not worried because they're all going to go on vacation to Nilbog in a house swap. So a family from Nilbog and they could come stay in their house in the big city. We're not sure where this is, the big city. And they're going to go stay in a place called Nilbog, which he boasts has a kind of population of 50 or something like that. Throughout this film, this guy's just doing the typical fucking city guy, goes into the countryside with his family, and every 5 minutes, you smell that, guys? That's country air. You see that? That's a country meadow. You're just constantly pointing out the differences between the city and the country like an asshole dad would, you know.
Look, there's nature here.
Yeah. Why don't you look at that tree, son? You don't get those in the city. You know, that sort of stuff. Like, look at the hospitality here. And all that kind of stuff. Because
there's all the food laid out for them and stuff.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that. A lot of his dialogue is that. The older sister, Holly, has got a sort of a romantic plot as well with her boyfriend Elliot. He sort of climbs up into her room. I think she gets some of the biggest howlers in the film in terms of dialogue. Elbows him in the groin. And he says, "What are you trying to do? Turn me into a homo?" Which is great. And then she's like, "Well, you can come on holiday, but don't bring all your friends. I don't believe in group sex." What does that mean? You don't believe in it? Like, it is a thing. Like, you don't have to do it.
She just bangs on about like how much she hates him, like having his friends there.
Yeah, she doesn't come across well as the girlfriend. No. Like, I felt quite a sympathy for him, you know? But then he no-shows the next morning, and obviously causes a massive problem. She's in a right mood in the car. Her dad says, "I'm sorry that your beau didn't turn up." And she said, "He's not my beau, he's my boyfriend." Okay. This scene reminded me quite a lot of like National Lampoon's Vacation, where they're all in the car sort of arguing, and I guess it's been in a lot of sort of summer family films.
Yeah.
They're all kind of arguing and snapping at each other. So, okay, let's all have a sing-song then. Josh, can you sing? Yeah, okay. Row, row, row your boat. But then they all start singing along, but they can't even do that in time with each other. And they don't even, not even all of them know the words to row your boat. They're like, you must know the words to row your boat. Like, and that's not, maybe it was in the script. Maybe the Italian script just trails off.
Yeah.
Row your boat. But at this point, we see that Elliot is actually following in a camper van, an RV, with 3 of his friends. So he gets to have the lads' holiday, and he gets to go with his girlfriend as well.
His girlfriend isn't happy.
She's not. No. Get another hallucination for this Josh character. I think he might have like brain damage or something, or a severe mental illness, because he's seeing his grandpa when he's died long ago. He has these hallucinations where he starts bleeding green from the hairline. Yeah. He's got twigs coming out of his hands. Yeah, in a different light, this could be a harrowing tale of a boy with severe mental disabilities, but not in this case. We get to Nilbog, finally. Exchange family are standing outside the house. They're all looking a bit sort of scabby. They've got weird scabs on their heads. You're late. Yes, I'm sorry, we had a little bit of a hold up. He's like, okay, well, here's the keys. Hope you enjoy Nilbog. And he's like, well, I hope you enjoy our city. And they start getting in the car. I hope you enjoy our house. And he just starts listing
all the stuff their house has.
Various items in his house that I'm sure they have as well, like microwave, fridge, a video player. I mean, it's 1990. I know they live in a small town, but I'm like, they've already started driving off, and it's like, refrigerator, microwave. Please be impressed. Yeah, nothing spectacular here. Front door, lampshade, like give up, man. Like, they're gone, you know. As soon as they come in, all the food has been prepared. All the food has a weird sort of minty green icing on it, the colour of the sort of liquid that the trolls drink. Josh is beckoned over to the window where the hallucination of his dead grandpa is, again. He says, it's very important that you do not let them eat that food. Whatever you do not let them eat that food. You have 30 seconds. It's like a fucking weird game show. And then, so he turns around and his family are just freeze frame. They're not moving for some reason. And they say he has 30 seconds. He walks around and sort of scratches his chin for, I would say, about 2 minutes as they're freeze framed. And this is just, what can I do? And it's just all building up to this ludicrous scene where he stands on a chair and undoes his fly, and you're just thinking, what the fuck is going to happen here? And they don't show it, but the implication is that he pisses all over the food. Yeah. And they're scraping off the food into the bin. It's just ridiculous.
They sort of unfreeze because the dad just gets really angry.
Yeah. His dad kind of picks him up over the shoulder and like stomps around the house trying to find an appropriate room to give him a telling off. His sister says, that's going to be a big spanking for a little shit, which is a great line. But this is all leading up to the dad's star moment in this film, his line that he's been repeating for years now at conventions: you can't piss on hospitality. There's this very strange gag here which doesn't quite land, where for a long time he seems to be undoing his belt as though he's going to give him a seeing to with the belt. And he's like, oh no, what are you going to do? And he's like, I'm tightening my belt so I won't have to eat.
Something about hunger pangs or something? Like.
So if you're not going to eat, I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
So the kid's punishment is that the rest of the family aren't going to eat for like 2 days. Very strange.
The way he delivers the line is just ridiculous as well.
Yeah, it's convoluted. It doesn't make any sense. Again, this is poor translation from Italian, I think. So yeah, now the family are inexplicably on hunger strike. We cut here to a bunch of the horny lads in the RV, and one of them called Arnold is a kind of nerdy lad. He sort of sees a girl running through the woods, all sort of clothes torn, and he thinks, ooh, an easy target. So he chases after her. These lads are all pretty rapey. He chases this girl through the woods, encounters the trolls, and he's not really that bothered. he tells them to bugger off, basically, and then they spear him. It's all this convoluted sort of chase sequence to get him to the... one of the main sets of this film is the church, but inside there's like a witch's lair. So it's all kind of gothic, Dracula's castle inside. And we get the witch character, who I would say, other than her ludicrous overacting, is probably still the best actor in the film, other than maybe the kid. I don't know if I mentioned as well, the actor that plays Josh, the kid, would go on to direct Best Worst Movie. So I guess 20 years later or so. Yeah, so I would say he was an alright actor, if overacting, and same about her. She's sort of done up to look like this mad kind of old goth woman with a nondescript European accent. Tommy Wiseau could be from anywhere in Europe kind of accent. She explains that she's descended from Druids and she's from Stonehenge.
Yeah, that gets mentioned a few times.
Why haven't you got an English accent? I don't think they know where Stonehenge is, these Italians.
No.
She makes them drink green goo, and then the girl sort of starts throwing it up and goes upstairs, starts sort of dissolving, and then the trolls start sort of attacking her, and then you get the most famous line in this film that I'm sure everyone listening to this will already have heard is the very slow zoom on Arnold with his glasses. They're eating her. Then they're gonna eat me. Oh my god! So everyone's seen that. Everyone's seen that clip, I'm sure, and it is fucking brilliant. It never gets old. That's really the peak of this film, I think.
Yeah.
But we continue. Another one of the lads from the RV goes shopping, and he's met by this kind of very odd store owner. This is fairly unbelievable, but if you think the guy who played the store owner looked a little bit intense and a little bit crazed, that is because he was an actual mental patient who was on day release from a mental hospital and ended up being cast during this extras casting call as someone with dialogue in this film.
Wow.
So he said that when he watched it back, he was not acting. This was how he was at that time. He was going through like a bad time, and he was just like that. He was that intense and wild-eyed all the time. So initially it appears like not a bad performance, but it's not actually a performance. So there's the fucking, the irresponsibility of I don't know how this guy was allowed to partake in a film whilst he was out from a mental hospital. But there he is. He pushes the special milk onto Drew, I think this lad is. It's got lots of vitamin D in it. I don't think I've mentioned yet, but another thing that frames the context of this film is that the director's wife came up with the idea for the story, and she wrote it because several of her friends had become vegetarian at the same time, and she was pissed off with them. So if it feels like this film has a strong anti-vegetarianism or meat versus vegetarianism, that is why. It was literally, this woman was a meat eater and she got really pissed off that all her friends went vegetarian and she couldn't invite them round. So she wrote this, whether it was a treatment or the full script, I wouldn't be surprised. But she wrote this to get back at her friends which had gone vegetarian. So there you go. Arnold, character, has by now been put in a pot with sort of twigs coming out of him. And it says turned into a tree, she says, but I think that's being generous. I think he's standing in a big plant pot with what looks like a big fake dog shit on his face. Not very convincing effects here. I would say we're about 45 minutes into the film, and there's a shocking revelation from Joshua. Nilbog looks at it in the mirror of a car. That spells goblin backwards. If only someone would have noticed that sooner. It could have been avoided. The witch bakes an ancient cake that has intestine purifying properties. Sounds delicious. She gives it to the family. We get this weird scene where there's all the village is in a barn, and there's a preacher kind of character who's again talking about, look at these fat humans stuffing their burgers and their steaks, and they're so disgusting, these humans. So sort of suggesting that no one in the village is human. Everyone in the village is like a vegetarian goblin.
Only goblins could be vegetarians.
Only disgusting little goblins could be vegetarians. Joshua kind of sneaks in and watches this meeting, and he sees that the exchange family they're meant to be swapping houses with never actually left town. They just went to the barn for this anti-meat talk.
Yeah.
But how will they ever discover microwave and VHS players? Like the fools.
You're missing out.
They're going to be sitting in the woods with their tofu, and they're not going to know about modern society. Like, this is terrible. But Josh is discovered, of course, and they try and force him to eat ice cream. Oh no! Terror. Yeah, they're not vegans, I notice, these characters. They still eat ice cream and they love milk. If anything, they drink a lot. They seem to go for a lot of dairy for vegetarians. Like, you think they were trying to push the whole plant thing, but they drink a lot of milk, a lot of ice cream, a lot of like cakes and stuff like that. Yeah. So, if anything, they're anti-vegan. There is a scene where the dad sits on the porch of the store reading a book about vegetarian cooking. And the illustration on the front is just like a couple of onions and a carrot or something like that.
And the camera just slowly zooms in and the shot lasts for so long.
Oh no! Vegetarian cooking! Ah! This is a horror movie to someone, for sure, but not to any of us. Drew makes an attempt to rescue Arnold from the witch's house by very slowly dragging the pot that he's rooted in, which is not a very scintillating action sequence, I have to say. The witch ends up chainsawing his legs off while he giggles to himself. At this point, the house is taken over by this weird vegetarian cult. They're all just in there, and they've made a lovely banquet to apologise for the misunderstanding when they tried to force-feed Josh ice cream. It was just a misunderstanding. We've made you a lovely banquet. Eat it! Eat it! Josh is told to go to his room, but luckily, Grandpa Seth turns up again and gives him a Molotov cocktail out of nowhere. It's like, oh, kind, loving grandpa who is a ghost. What can you possibly do to help me? Try one of these. Try this homemade explosive device. Oh, thanks very much. Bizarre. I think the director was trying to mix in a bit of like Rambo or Commando halfway through. Like, you know what? We haven't set anything on fire yet. Can we set something on fire? And so the Molotov cocktail actually goes off while it's in the preacher's hand, and he very slowly, comically burns to death in front of everyone. But then once he has burnt to death, you can then see that he was a goblin underneath. The hollow sort of goblin shell. It gets pretty out of control here between the Molotov cocktails and the people burning to death. The witch teleports into the house but appears as a goblin. Has a hand chopped off, but then sticks it in the Stonehenge and it regenerates. Just fucking ramblings of a madman by this point. The preacher makes the ghost of Grandpa have another heart attack and die a ghost death. Die again. So he's not allowed to be a ghost anymore somehow. We get this completely unnecessary and unrelated scene where the witch casts a spell on herself which turns her into a bit of a sexy goth.
Yeah.
So she hasn't got like the weird scabby lips and crazy hair. She's like a bit of an Elvira kind of character, sexy goth. I think it's the same actress. And she goes to seduce the last remaining lad in the RV, presumably just because it's a loose end and we have to do something. We can't just leave this character out there, so we've got to tie it up. Pretty late in the game, I would say. And there's just this unbelievable sequence where he turns on the telly and he sees her outside, sort of vamping her way towards the thing with the corn on the cob, and there's some sort of bootleg version of Sledgehammer playing, like sexy, and he's like,
what kind of show is this?
What show is this? I think the director thinks this is like porn for vegetarians or something, like women with corn on the cobs and cucumber doing unspeakable things, it's so weird. It results in one of the more awkward sex scenes, kissing with a corn on the cob and eating it. It's fucking horrible. But he says, I do like popcorn. She's like, oh well, why don't we heat things up?
So it just starts raining popcorn in this trailer.
I think it's raining popcorn to suggest that there's an orgasm happening at some point. Like in some movies when they cut away to fireworks.
Yeah.
This is like popcorn. To show that this lad's like blowing his load in his pants. The purpose of this, I have no idea. It's dragging on a bit now. All the family run back inside the house where, for some inexplicable reason, the townspeople can't come back in again. So they were in there a minute ago, and then they all piled out to see what was happening when someone was burning to death. The family runs back in, and now they can't go back in again. They just have to stand outside and taunt them with sandwiches. Like, chuck some sandwiches. You're gonna have to eat sometime. Have some sandwiches. It's very kind. Thanks very much. They have an impromptu seance to summon Grandpa again. Like, I thought he was dead. Like, dead. Grandpa handily informs us that there's only 10 minutes left in the film. So we better get a move on. And then all of a sudden the townspeople turn into goblins and they can enter the house for some weird fucking reason. So it's all a big fucking mess here. Goblins are being punched down the stairs, falling off of balconies.
I was thinking, is this coming to an end, or is it
just starting again?
Yeah.
It's flitting between the house and the witch's house because Josh has teleported himself to the witch's house for some reason. There's some sort of portal between the house and the witch's houses for reasons of budget, probably. The idea is that you need to destroy Stonehenge, and then that will destroy something. But really what I took away here was the way that the goblins were defeated is that Josh takes out his bologna sandwich that his mother offered him on the drive up, but he'd never eat. And he's like, a double-decker bologna sandwich. That's right, meat. There's meat in this sandwich. You don't like that, do you? And they're, no, don't do it.
Not the meat.
Don't do it. And he bites into it and they all start freaking out and like dissolving and eyeballs are popping. And the rest of the family lay their hands on Stonehenge at the same time. It's just nonsense. They all melt and get destroyed. The family go back to their own house, back to the comfort of the microwave and refrigerator. For some reason, it's just the mum and the kid. I think the other two have to go off and do something else for some reason. The kid said, I'm going to go upstairs and have a nap. And then he comes back down and is a very poor effigy of his naked mother on the dinner table. You just see like this like rubber tit sticking up in the air. And she's just being eaten by 5 or 6 goblins again.
Yeah.
And then the kid does his best, oh my God, again, and freeze frame, and that's the end. Not a very happy ending, as it turns out. And this is not hallucination, as far as we're aware. This is they survived the entire film for his mother to be eaten in front of him as a finale. Oh, it doesn't send you home very happy, does it?
That's it. We don't know what's going to happen after that.
Not much resolution.
No.
Not a very happy ending. There you go.
Troll 2.5, anyone?
There was a Troll 3.
Oh.
I haven't seen it. Apparently it was unrelated. But there you go. Troll 2, an icon of bad film cinema. What were your overall impressions of your first watch of Troll 2, Mark?
Wow. It was hilarious. The acting was absolutely terrible. It was
because they're not actors.
Yeah. Which I didn't know until you said that.
Yeah, exactly.
About half an hour ago. But
it frames it.
Definitely didn't surprise me. The dialogue is awful, as in the whole script.
Yeah,
it's just rubbish. But it's hilarious. The plot kind of just goes all over the place, especially towards the end. You just
jam-packed for how long it is. I'm not sure how long it is, but they cram so much into this film, and
like an hour and a half. I think.
It's a pretty good laugh count. You laugh pretty much once every 20 or 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why it's up there in terms of bad movies.
I enjoyed it. I laughed a lot, and it was ridiculous and fun.
You see why it has the reputation in the community. Yeah. It's funny because Claudio Agrasso, the director, he's one of these people that's made a bad movie and has not quite decided how to handle it yet. Like Tommy Wiseau for a while, wasn't quite sure. Yeah. Initially, he was deeply offended that people thought this was a bad movie. How dare you? This is a masterpiece. But then, as he saw the success it was having as a cult film, well, of course, I wrote it as a comedy. Of course, you're meant to laugh. It's a very clever comical satire on vegetarianism. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course it is. But then he's had these moments where apparently a couple of years ago there was a Q&A with the cast, and he turned up uninvited and just shouted, "You're all dogs, you're all liars," at the cast. So it seems like he flits between being quite offended that people think this is a bad movie and sort of making the best of it as Tommy Wiseau does. So he's a pretty interesting character. I'm not sure what else he directed, but I think again this is the right formula for a bad movie. This is someone doing what they thought was something amazing and was super clever, and it was going to be a huge hit. Yeah, I'm sure it didn't do very well on its release. Probably Troll 1 was considered the masterpiece, but it's obviously gone on to become an iconic film. As I said, everyone can watch best worst movie. The documentary, much like the Isle of Dr. Moreau documentary you mentioned a few episodes ago, it kind of just tells a fascinating story of just a complete shitstorm and how these things were able to happen, how they sort of came together. So yeah, Troll 2, well deserved icon of bad movie, Hall of Fame. So Mark, if you had to invite one of these films around to your house in a great show of hospitality, and if you had to banish one to the woods, which one would you have for tea? Which one would you banish?
Well, I think this is quite an easy decision. I'd have Troll 2 around for tea.
Yeah, because it would amuse you to know.
Yeah. Not only because it was funnier and more ridiculous and worse, but also just so much more iconic.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, and like everything about it is just
the highlight reel for this film.
The one everyone remembers and the one everyone wants to watch, really. But yeah, and it was, I just did enjoy it more. I laughed more. It was more stupid.
I agree. Troll 2 is a real masterpiece of bad filmmaking. If anything, Troll 1 had too much talent in it, and that's not to say that it had a lot of talent, but it had too much working against it in terms of some semblance of a script and actual actors. I just can't believe that these people were cast as lead actors in a film.
Yeah.
I can't believe that this sort of script was able to come out the way it did and be performed the way it did. Just, you know, bad movies are made great when inept people try really hard, and that's what this director and his wife were doing. They tried really hard to make what they thought was a brilliant pastiche of vegetarianism and the way society was going. And, oh, look at you, goblins, eating your green stew. You know. Troll 2, a true masterpiece of the genre, if you can call it that, and one that's been going to go on for years and years. I think it's going to have the longevity of The Room and things like that. It's going to keep going, and many of the people who are in this film have sort of become minor celebrities in their own right. The dentist that was in Troll 2, the only acting role this guy's ever done, and then he went back to being a dentist straight afterwards. He says sometimes he's doing a filling on someone and they'll go, hang on, don't piss on hospitality, stuff like that. And obviously the little kid made a documentary about it. So in fact the cast have done quite well out of this. I don't know about the director, but
you think they've made some money off of this?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, they go to conventions and stuff, so you got to make a little bit of money off of that. So there it is, Troll 2, the better bad movie here, but Troll 1 worth checking out as well if you like 80s kind of creature feature rubber monster type movies. So please do subscribe to the podcast. Every time we release a new one, you will be the first one to know. If you could give us a share around, let your friends know about the Bad Movie podcast. That would be great as well. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. That really helps us out as well. Like I said, go over to the YouTube channel. We do post all of these podcasts on there as videos if you like to listen to your podcasts on YouTube. And we've also started posting these short, sharp schlock videos which review more recent movies that you may have actually seen or interested in seeing and
probably enjoyed.
Maybe enjoyed, yeah. We've got a couple of them up on there already. Actually, my review of Midsummer has already had over 100 views. I know that's a movie that people can't stop talking about, and one of the more fascinating movies of the year. absurd in places. In places, it could be a bad movie, but for the most part, it's pretty good. It's pretty interesting. So if you want to let me know what you thought of Midsummer or more recent movies like Godzilla King of the Monsters, Boar, the giant pig movie, I Am Mother, the Netflix film, I've got reviews for all of those ones on there. So go onto the YouTube channel, let me know what you thought of those films, and stay tuned for more short, sharp schlocks. So that has been another episode of Schlock Tactics. My name has been Ash, and I've been joined by Mark.
Good night.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye.